Live from Los Angeles. Welcome back to Good Morning, LaLa. And we talk a lot about the power of thinking for good. And so Alex Korb, he's a doctor, PhD from Brown University, talking about the upward spiral that we can take a downward spiral and an upward spiral. Apparently, we all want to take the upward spiral.
Yes.
How are you?
Great. Great to be here.
You're a neuroscientist.
Yeah. So I went to Brown undergrad. I went to grad school at UCLA, and then just UCLA.
So you're a smarty pants, is what you're trying to tell us.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I use my brain too much, I guess, which is why I've evolved.
But you got these great books to show for it.
Yeah, so give us the skinny. You basically are using it to basically take control of anxiety, stress, and depression.
Yeah. Basically, I started getting a PhD in neuroscience a while ago, and I was studying what was happening in the brain in depression and trying to use EEG, which is electrical recordings from the brain, to try and figure out whether we can predict who's going to get helped by medication. And through that process, I started to realize, oh wait, there's so many other ways to affect the activity and chemistry of these key brain circuits that don't involve medication, that don't involve high-tech interventions developed in a lab. So it's not that these SSRIs or transcranial magnetic stimulation, it's not that those things aren't useful. It's just that a lot of times people overlook the simpler, low-tech changes that they could be making in their lives that don't seem as sciencey. Yeah. So, these high-tech interventions, it's easy to see, oh yeah, that affects my brain. But things like gratitude, for example, or exercise, or even just deep breathing, a lot of people think, well, that's not neuroscience, and yet recent research has shown that these small kinds of life changes are actually capable of targeting these key brain circuits involved in mood and stress and anxiety and emotional control.
Most people, though, skip the life changes and they go straight to a prescription pill.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for the medication, the prescriptions. I fully believe that.
Yeah.
But can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. No, I think one of the funny things that I notice when people read my book is they bring whatever perspective they already have into it. And some people say, oh, I'm so glad you're so against medication. And other people are like, oh, I'm so glad you had a whole chapter on medication. And I'm like, right, I'm not against medication. I have a whole chapter on it.
I'm for health.
Right, exactly. I just, and some people are like, yeah, but you put the chapter on medication at the end. And I'm like, well, yeah, because it's a self-help book. You can't prescribe yourself medication. And I think what you said is absolutely right. There's definitely a time and a place. And the way I think of medication is that it's extremely powerful. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't work for everybody. So studies have shown that if you're depressed, about 40% of people will get completely better on one medication. You just take it for a few months and your depression is gone. And if you're one of those 40% of people, it seems, well, absolutely. Why wouldn't you take it? It seems like the easiest path.
You could live a life just like everyone does in those commercials.
Yes, exactly.
Struggling model in Miami. We know that life.
But the majority of people, they're either helped, somewhat, but not all the way, or they have bad side effects, or they're not really helped that much. And the problem is, and this is what I was studying my PhD dissertation on, is we don't know ahead of time who's going to be helped or not. So you sort of have to wait those 2 or 3 months taking the medication to find out, is this the answer? And one of the things that I realized about the upward spiral is we should stop trying to look for the one solution for depression, because there's not often one solution. Yeah, maybe you'll get lucky and you'll find, oh yeah, this medication is perfect, great, that works for you. But for most people, it's some combinations of different interventions. Maybe it involves medication, maybe it involves exercise or dietary changes, or changing your thought patterns, or changing the people that you're interacting with.
I think it's an exciting time for, science coming together with even a positive psychology or spirituality or whatever you want to call it, and being able to measure. Because look, I can measure when my life's getting better or worse. I don't need a scientist to do that. Right. But I think it's important for us to have backing of proof of that for people, because then they know, oh, if I do have gratitude, my life gets better. So what are some of those like measurements for people? Like, is it, I would imagine it's like the placebo or no placebo. If they believe it's going to work, then it'll work, right? So
Yeah. Well, so actually, I'm glad you mentioned the placebo effect, because like I'm a huge proponent of the placebo effect.
Totally.
People are always saying, "Oh yeah, well that's just like the placebo effect or whatever."
Great.
Great. I want to remind them the placebo effect doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Right.
The placebo effect just refers to like how it works.
The power of
it,
belief.
Right. It still works, and in fact, you want to get as much placebo effect as you can, because what the placebo effect means is that's the brain figuring out how to get you better all on its own, which some people dismiss and like, yeah, that's not as real, except the thoughts that you have and the actions you take and the interactions you have, those produce measurable changes in the brain's activity and chemistry. So like, you don't need to, get an MRI or get an EEG to tell you what those specific changes in your brain are. Because you can start to feel it. It changes your emotions, it changes your thought patterns. And one of the things I like to discuss in the book is teaching people about their brain and their nervous system and the various chemicals that affect their mood, like
And I love that. So you
dopamine.
have an actual workbook that goes along with the book. I love that. I'm all about workbooks.
Yeah.
Like my whole life's workbook. So tell us about the workbook and what they do along with
So
the
the
book.
workbook came out just a few months ago, actually. Because I wrote the Upward Spiral about 4 years ago, and it's mostly focused on explaining what's happening in the brain in depression, and has about 20% of like, oh, well, try this, and you can change your dopamine or change your serotonin system or activate your prefrontal cortex. And a lot of people were telling me, and were telling the publisher, they just wanted a little bit more guidance, a little bit more specific instruction about what to do. Okay, what kind of exercise? How should I practice gratitude? How can I change my interactions? And so that's why I wrote the workbook, which has a complementary emphasis focused mostly on, okay, enacting these small changes in your life.
Yes, knowing is doing.
Right.
Knowing is
Well,
doing.
thank you
Yeah.
for keeping your mind open beyond just traditional science to open up to more possibility. I think it's
Yeah.
important for all of us to stay open to all areas.
Yeah,
for sure.
my pleasure. I
Yep.
think one of the problems that people have with the stigma about medication is they think it's this like totally separate thing. And one of the points that I want to make is like, well, medication is one way to activate the serotonin system, for example, and exercise is another, or gratitude is another. And so we shouldn't like look down on people who need medication or think that it's the only answer. It's just we should utilize all of the tools that we have at our disposal.
Absolutely. And I do have a preference for those things with the least number of side effects as well. So when in doubt. But yes, absolutely love this multivitamin kind of approach.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Where
That's
can
a
people
good-
find
yeah.
you and follow you? And
So my website is alexkorbphd.com, and my Instagram is the Upward Spiral Approach, and on Twitter I'm Prefrontal Blog.
appropriately so.
Prefrontal
Awesome.
cortex.
Thank you so
yes.
much. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.